Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 227. Tonight, we're going to jump back down to the Virgin Islands, and we're going to check in on Denise George and her battle with Jeffrey Epstein's estate. Now, previously, we talked about Denise George and the really weird and odd transactions that was going on within Jeffrey Epstein's small bank that he had set up down in the Virgin Islands. Now, nobody really knows what is going on with this bank. Nobody's been able to provide any clarification, and the estate has not explained what the bank's purpose was or why it went into effect after his death. So Denise George is continuing to follow this thread, and she is demanding answers in the Virgin Island about the operations of the Southern Country International Bank. So this article we're going to read tonight is from the New York Times. The headline, Virgin Islands again questions Epstein's estate transactions. The author of this article is Matthew Goldstein. A top law enforcement official in the U.S. Virgin Islands contends a small bank set up there by the convicted sex offender, pedophile, Jeffrey Epstein engaged in a series of unexplained transactions involving tens of millions of dollars before and after his death. Well, we know that these transactions were going on for Jeffrey Epstein's whole entire career. This wasn't just, something that happened overnight and a one-time thing, right? Epstein was definitely manipulating the money system, was definitely manipulating financial institutes, and he was washing his money with the okay of some of these banks, in my opinion. You mean to tell me these banks had no idea what was going on? A guy like Jess Staley had no idea what was going on? Deutsche Bank had no idea what was going on? JP Morgan? You mean all of the people that caused the financial crisis in 2008, 2009? All of those same scumbags, had no idea that Jeffrey Epstein was laundering money through their institutions. Okay. The Attorney General for the Virgin Islands, Denise N. George, said in a court filing last week that representatives for Mr. Epstein's estate have not explained these irregularities over the transactions. And they haven't. I've combed through the news. I've been very, very aware of what's going on down there in the Virgin Islands, and I've been covering this portion of the case almost rabidly at this point. And nobody can explain these transactions. Nobody can explain these irregularities, and nobody from the estate has even tried. None of the lawyers, not Indike, not Khan, nobody. So Denise George is doing her job. Right? She's doing what she's supposed to do here, and she's trying to get to the bottom of just exactly what was occurring with this bank. Miss George offered that as one reason she was opposed to lifting criminal activity liens she placed on much of the financier, pedophile's, $600 million estate because of the federal sex trafficking allegations against him before he died. And yeah, that was the bank situation was why she put the lien on the account in the first place before it was removed so they could move forward with the compensation fund. But again, even with the compensation fund moving forward, this is a portion that has not been answered for, meaning the irregularity of this bank and what its purpose was and where the funds went, who they were distributed to, etc., etc. These are all very important questions, and these also could lead to a RICO case. The transactions, totaling $39 million, involve Southern Country International, which Mr. Epstein established in 2014. The bank was an international banking entity permitted to handle money only from non-domestic customers, and Miss George said some of the transactions appeared to violate the bank's charter. Now, this is interesting as well. They give Jeffrey Epstein the permit to set this bank up here, right? Officials in the Virgin Islands, some of Denise George's predecessors and some of her colleagues now, I'm sure. They give him the permission to set this bank up, but the stipulation is, well, you can't deal with anybody from the Virgin Islands. They can't use this bank. I wonder why. Could it be that they knew that this bank wasn't on the up and up and they didn't want their citizens getting hosed by Jeffrey Epstein and in turn causing problems that they'd have to come and try and put out some fires? There's a lot going on here, folks. There's a lot playing out behind the scenes, and there is only a scratch of the surface that we have seen so far. Andrew Tomback, one of the team of lawyers working for the estate, did not respond to a request for comment. But in an email included as an exhibit by Miss George's office, Mr. Tomback said the issues raised about the bank transactions were based upon both incomplete information and faulty assumptions, and thus are incorrect. And again, we see this from the legal team of Jeffrey Epstein and his friends. This is how they operate. Oh, well, this is based upon incomplete information and faulty assumptions, and thus are incorrect. And then they won't elaborate. They don't add any context to it. They just make a statement and expect us to believe that statement. Because for so long, every single time these people made an excuse, the legacy media and the parasites that inhabit it ran with the narrative that they were fed by the sick, twisted bastards. At the same time, they're busy sitting on interviews like Amy Robach over at ABC. They're actively working against these survivors. And you expect us to believe that the estate is going to be held accountable by a legacy media such as that? Zero chance. Zero chance. And this is what they try to do all the time. This is their MO. Oh, it's a technicality. Oh, they weren't playing with a straight bat. Oh, she can't say that because it's protected under sealed document. Oh, please, enough is enough. And that's why there needs to be trials in this case. That's why all of these people need to sit down in front of investigators and answer questions under oath. That way, they can't kick the can down the road. That way, they can't try and avoid the justice that is inevitably coming their way for a minute longer. In the filing made Thursday, Ms. George said her office could find no record of a $15.5 million loan the estate said Southern Country had made to Mr. Epstein to pay for his criminal defense. The estate had cited the loan as the reason for some $12 million in net transfers to the bank in December. So Jeffrey Epstein's taking a loan from Jeffrey Epstein? I wonder how many points he's charging himself. This is such an absolute shit show. This should be all over the front page of every newspaper. Forensic accountants should be deployed this instant to track down every last cent, every single transaction that has ever been made through this bank. In fact, any bank that Jeffrey Epstein has ever put money into. It is the only way to get to the bottom of this. Her office also said there was an unexplained transfer of $24 million from the bank to Southern Trust, a company that Mr. Epstein founded and said was engaged in DNA research and analysis. Yeah, let's put a company that's engaging in DNA research and analysis on a Virgin Island because, it's so close to other scientific institutes. It's so close to other places where scientists are busy with their experiments and running trials and whatnot. It was all a front, okay? All of this stuff, this DNA research company, everything Jeffrey Epstein had going on in the Virgin Islands was an absolute front. Point blank, period. In April, the estate said Southern Country had repaid a loan late last year to a company associated with Mr. Epstein's estate, but that filing did not disclose the name of the company or the amount of the payment. This is a money laundering operation. Putting money into this bank, washing it so it looks legal, and then putting it back in Jeffrey Epstein's pocket. How much more evidence do you folks need? Why are there no indictments? What in the hell is going on? It is perplexing that one set of transactions is confirmed by relevant records, but that the questioned $15.5 million loan is not. Lawyers for Miss George's office wrote in a letter included in the exhibits. Look, Miss George, here is some unsolicited advice from me. Go ahead and hire as many forensic accountants as you possibly can and let them loose. Let them have a field day with what they find. Because what you're going to find is a lot more people than we even could possibly imagine were involved with Jeffrey Epstein financially, and how many of those people received ill-gotten gains. In the same letter, the lawyers also noted that accounts controlled by Darren Indyke and Richard Kahn, the co-executors of Mr. Epstein's estate, had deposited about $9 million into the bank in November. Both men were longtime business advisors to Mr. Epstein. Again, more money washing. Darren Indyke and Richard Kahn need to be indicted for fraudulent money crimes. Okay? Money fraud, wire fraud, all of it. Every single one of these predicates a RICO indictment. I mean, maybe if their names ended in vowels, and they were Italian, everybody would be arrested. Every person they know, everybody they've ever done business with, anybody they've made a phone call to, they'd have their life completely and utterly invaded by the federal authorities. But Darren Indyke and Richard Kahn, they could put $9 million into this shit bank that doesn't even really exist, this front company, and walk away smelling like roses? I don't know about you folks, but I am completely sick and tired of the two-tier justice system, and I am completely tired of the way these people manipulate it on a regular basis, while the rest of us are left to just try and maintain, to try and swim up current. I am tired of it. Darren Indyke and Richard Kahn are as guilty as the day is long, in my opinion. And the fact that these two men are still running around and are still involved in what's going on with this case from a legal perspective, when they should be lawyering up themselves and worrying about their own RICO indictments, here they are still engaging in wire fraud and money laundering right under everybody's nose, and again, nothing is done. It is an absolute joke. The justice system is a joke, and how could they expect any of us to have faith in anything that they are up to? Ms. George's office imposed the lien after filing a civil forfeiture lawsuit in January against Mr. Epstein's estate. Her office has previously criticized the estate for the lack of transparency about its finances. Last month, however, she dropped her objections to the estate's plan to establish a compensation fund for Mr. Epstein's survivors. Well, I agree with her dropping the lien, obviously, because I want this compensation fund set up and I want it to start, doling out money. And speaking of that, today is the 15th. It's the day that the fund should have kicked into action. So we should be hearing some reports very soon about those funds and if they're being distributed, how everything's going, if the estate's, being fair, etc., etc. So I'm very interested to see how this all plays out. Obviously, we'll be following this and covering this extensively. This is a very important part of the case, and we will continue to dig when it comes to these financial institutions and the money laundering aspect of an obvious RICO situation. If you'd like to contact me, you could do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All right, everybody, enjoy your night.